Welcome back. This is Jennifer McGuire, and I'm glad you're here. So today's video, I have a load of cards and a load of tips for you. Now, the cards I'm making are die-cut easel pop-up cards. But what this video is really about is stretching your dies to get new looks, using small dies in different ways, and also tips for mass producing with die-cut assembly. I originally wasn't going to do a video on this. These are just the projects that my daughter and I have been making up on the kitchen table over the last few weeks. But I shared some things over on Instagram and many people asked for videos, so I decided to pull it together. Now, I will say also that with the cards that I'm using today, I did use pop-up easel die sets from Poppy Stamps. However, you can use the things I talk about with many of the products you already have. And I will be doing a video soon showing how you can create your own pop-up easel cards using whatever dies or stamps you have. But today is all about die cutting. Die cutting is definitely my favorite process, so that's what we're focusing on today. So throughout this video, think of all the ways you can stretch dies that you have to get new looks. Now let's start with these little birdhouse cards. It's actually a winter birdhouse pop-up easel die set from Poppy Stamps, but I'm going to show you how to make it non-winter also. I've had these die sets for a long time and I'm so glad to finally get to use them. I think they're really well thought out and really fun to put together. Now with a die set this large, the price point is a bit higher because there's so much included. So I like to consider two things. One, that I'll make a lot of cards with the set, and two, that there are ways I can use the set creatively to get different looks. This particular die set comes with a cardinal and then also some snow pieces. So it's really meant for winter birdhouse scene, but I'm going to show you a way to make it a spring scene and share some other ideas. Now, the first thing I like to do when I want to mass produce a die cut card is do all of my die cutting at once. Now, when I do this, I make sure I have trays that I can keep all the little pieces in and organized. Any trays work, whatever you have is fine. But I will tell you, I just found the ultimate organizer for little die cuts. I will talk about that at the end of this video. I'm so excited about it. So I'll show you that at the end. But here, I went through and I die cut all the different pieces included in the die set so I could have everything ready to go. For die cut cards, I like to use white cardstock that is inexpensive. Because you're going to be die cutting so much and you're not inking or stamping on it, you just want a heavyweight white cardstock. As long as it's heavyweight, it really doesn't matter. I will link below to the inexpensive white cardstock that I recommend for die cutting, so be sure to check that out if you're looking for a source. For the front of my birdhouses, you can see the dies create scored lines going across it, which I think is really cool. But I want to change that up sometimes so they don't all look the same. So on some of my die cut pieces, I also used a background piercing die to add texture. That's a great way to stretch the look of your dies, is to add that texture. So on this one, I used the Pinkfresh Studio Stitches die that you can see over to the right. It does not cut anything except the patterns that you see there. So I die cut my birdhouse front, and then I use that die on top of it. For this one is the Simon Says Stamp Detail Bohemian plate die. I've used both of these in videos before, and it just adds a little bit of texture to your die cuts. A great way to step it up a bit, and also change things up so you don't get bored creating too many of the same. Now the die set includes all the pieces you need to assemble your card and make the scene. I will say there is something that I do that really is not necessary. I like to build up layers. So usually you only need to glue one of these down and just have one on there, and it reduces the bulk too. However, I like to die cut 2 or 3 so there's dimension to it. That is totally your choice, and if you want to do that, I wanted to make these cards extra special because they're going to people who donated to help my friend Liz and her family when they lost their husband and dad. So these are special thank you cards. So I wanted to put in that extra time and effort. So if you want, you can build up your layers 2 or 3 tall to add that dimension. You'll notice it on mine, but really doing one layer would be perfectly fine and look beautiful. So now it's time to start assembling. I recommend assembling one part, then move on to the next part, instead of doing all of one card and then all of another. This helps it stay fresh and it keeps you focused. I also recommend when doing a lot of die cut assembly to use a liquid adhesive, something that's strong that you don't need much of, and you can be sure it'll stay put together. It's also more affordable if you use a liquid adhesive over a tape runner or double-sided adhesive. Now, there are times when I like to use a double-sided adhesive, which I'll show you later, but almost all of the time I use a strong liquid adhesive, such as this one here, which is Gina K Connect liquid adhesive. You don't need a lot, and it'll hold in the long run. I know some people like to use inexpensive tape runners when assembling like this, but I have heard so many stories of cards falling apart when the adhesive kind of dries up. So you want to make sure you have a good quality, but also be affordable. And I think liquid adhesive is a great option for that. There are many liquid adhesives out there that are great. I like the Gina K Connect because it's easy to squeeze and it's strong, and also another one which I'll show you soon. So off screen, up on my kitchen table, Lila and I assembled the front of these cards. Next, I wanted to show you some tips for mass-producing heat embossed sentiments, like the ones you see in the center. Although these are winter cards, I did not make them holiday cards. I wanted these all to be thank you or hello cards. Now, for the center of the birdhouse, I wanted to do a white heat embossed sentiment on a dark gray cardstock. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool, which is one of the best tools when you're doing a lot of stamping. I have 4 different sentiments lined up in my MISTI, so I can stamp them all at once, which saves a lot of time. I stamp them with Versamark ink, and then I use Gina K Designs white embossing powder. This is an ultra fine embossing powder, which is great for small sentiments such as these. So I stamp one with Versamark ink and add the embossing powder. Stamp another with Versamark ink, add the embossing powder. And I do that for 5 or 6. Then I heat set them all at once. It's faster to heat set them all at once because your gun gets really hot and it melts the embossing powder faster. So you can see these aren't lined up, but that's okay because I'm die cutting them out with the circle die. Now, before we move on, I just wanted to show you where those sentiments that I used are from. The Simon Says Stamp Botanical Heart Stamp Set is where I got the thank you and the just a note to say hello. I just dug through my stamp sets and looked for small sentiments that would fit nicely in a circle. So go through your old stamps and find ways to use them again. I also used the Hello Friend from the Simon Says Stamp Delicate Flower Stamp Set. I also stamped some that said Hello Sunshine, which will be for the spring birdhouse cards that I'll show you in a few minutes. And that's from the Simon Says Stamp Hello Sunshine Stamp Set. So I just white heat embossed all of those at once and then used the center hole of the birdhouse die set to die cut a circle to pop in there. I'll talk a bit more about what I used on these cards, but now that I have the fronts all done, let's do the easel assembly. So this die is in the easel pop-up set. You fold along the top score line, which I'm reinforcing right now with my bone folder. Then you fold the opposite way on this little flap. The die creates score lines there, so you know exactly where to do the folding. On this little flap, I'm using a strong liquid adhesive. This is Honeybee Precision Tip Glue, which is another great liquid adhesive option. But you could use double-sided tape here if you want. Just make sure whatever you use is strong. I then center up my birdhouse front pieces that we've assembled right on it, and there we have our easel pop-up card. So you can either open it by pulling the top up, or you can make it stand up by setting it this way, which I think is a great way to display these cards. So I have all my card fronts done, the birdhouse fronts. All I have to do is add them all onto the easel pieces. So here's another look at the easel. You can stamp another sentiment there or put another decorative piece there, so it shows when it's on display. But that's where I plan to put a little personal message from me. It's totally up to you what you put there. You can even put a die cut there so it's kind of a stopper to hold up the easel, but I found that's not necessary, but that is another option. So here you'll see all the different winter birdhouse cards that Lila and I made over the last couple weeks. I tell you, I love this process of assembling die cuts. I know everybody's different. Some people prefer stamping and making one of a kind. Do whatever makes you happy. I especially like making a lot of cards like this right before the holidays. A few years ago, our family stopped sending out holiday cards, and instead, we like to mass produce cards that we can give to senior centers or teachers or folks at the grocery store or whatever. It's just something that we've enjoyed doing. Now you can see these fit nicely into a regular note card envelope, so these are a little bit smaller than 4¼ inches wide. Another way I wanted to stretch this die set is to use it for a non-easel card. So here I have one of my assembled birdhouse fronts, and I'm just gluing it onto the front of a 4¼ by 5½ inch top folding white note card. So that's another option for this. So don't feel like you need to use the whole set every time. You could just use parts of it. Like say use that bird on another card with maybe some stamps that you have. Now I used the die cuts from the die set on this particular card. I did use 2 other die sets. One is the Simon Says Stamp Mini Hearts Party die that you can see there to the right. It cuts a bunch of hearts at once, and I have a gold glitter heart at the top of each birdhouse from that. Also, you see there's a wing on the bird. I used a really old Memory Box stitched leaves die set, and I thought that little die would be nice for a wing on the bird. It's an old set, so you could look through any of your leaf dies to create a wing if you want to add that, or you can use a circle die. You cut it once, offset it, and cut it again to create a little wing. I often add a lot of extra details because I enjoy it. You can definitely skip those and keep it simple if you want. Next, I wanted to show you how I took that same winter birdhouse die set, but made it a spring or summer feel. I really like to stretch my die sets to give them different looks. I know many of us invest in winter or holiday stamp sets and die sets, and they only get used once a year. This is a way to kind of rethink it and give it more use throughout the year. So here I'm just die cutting a bunch of things at once. You'll notice that not all the pieces I'm die cutting are for the same card. If I'm going to run my plates through the die cut machine, I'm going to have it cut as many pieces at once. So I'm cutting the window for one of my cards later in this video, the roof for another card, and then the little sunshine sentiment for these cards right now. It really helps to save time by die cutting multiple things at once. Okay, so now I'm putting in the different sentiments. You saw me white heat emboss those earlier. I die cut the circle and then popped it in place. And here is where I'm adding the hearts. Now, again, as I mentioned, I like to add dimension. So I'm gluing 2 white hearts together. And then on top of that, a gold glitter heart. That Simon Says Stamp Hearts Party die cuts so many hearts at once, it makes it pretty quick to do this. And that helps to make it stand out. If you've never stacked die cuts and are unsure about it, I encourage you to make 2 cards, one where you don't stack your die cuts and one where you do, and see if it makes a big difference to you. To me it does, and is worth the time and effort. But that's one way to figure out if it's worth the time and effort to you too. Okay, now on this bird house, I did change up the bird and the foliage that I added to it. I could have used the cardinal bird from the die set and kind of cut the top of the bird off to have a different look. However, I have bought every one of the Feathered Friends bird die sets from Papertrey Inc. I think they're fun to assemble and can be used for many occasions, and I use them a lot for mass producing. So I used one of those for the birds on this set. I just die cut all the pieces, assembled them, and added them to the front. For the flowers on these cards, I used an old discontinued set from Memory Box called Blooming Borders. It just cuts flowers and leaves, but there are many die sets that have flower and leaf small dies included that would work for this, so use whatever you have. I also added some white pearls to the flowers for a bit of dimension, and then the gold glitter heart at the top. For sentiments in these, I also used the Simon Says Stamp Vacation Time stamp set for the small Missing You. And then I also needed a few congrats cards, so I did the Simon Says Stamp It's No Secret stamp set for the congrats message. So this shows how you can take a winter or holiday die set and just change a few elements to make it cards for other seasons. Okay, let's move on to another design. This is a die set that's used to make a pop-up easel card that's a winter house scene. However, I'll show you how you can change it up and make it a scene that you can use all year round. Also, I'll give you some tips for stepping up the design so that you have a really special scene. This is the Poppy Stamp Winter House Pop-Up Easel die set. There are a lot of dies included in the set. Look at the little detail dies that create all the different types of windows. And you also have the snow that goes on top of each window. The one there in the middle, though, that goes on another die set. Sorry, it kind of jumped over to this one. But all the others at the top are included in the set. Now, this is, again, meant to create a snowy scene, but we'll change it up a bit later. So I die cut, again, all the different pieces. And I wanted to show you how I step these up to make them more special. So I wanted, when you look through the windows, it to be a little dreamy looking or a little bit like glass. You could put acetate back there, but what I decided to do was put some pearlescent vellum behind the windows. This is from Lawn Fawn. It has a beautiful shine to it. So what I do is I cut it to be a little bit smaller than the house front. I put a little bit of liquid adhesive on the back. You can see I'm barely squeezing any out as I do this. Then I lay that pearlescent vellum on it. You can see how it picks up the light nicely. And I glue that to the back. That way I don't have to worry about putting a scene on the inside of the windows because that would take way too long. And so by putting that pearlescent vellum, it just adds a little interest inside the windows. Now this will get glued onto that white panel that goes around all of the card fronts for these pop-up cards. Now this die set and the next one I'm going to use has a door that actually opens. So you could put a scene on the inside if you wanted to. I'm going to later probably just glue a heart behind the door, but going to keep that part simple since the rest is pretty elaborate with this design. One of the things that I do like to do normally when mass producing cards or making a lot at once is to change up the colors on each. On the last one, I did most of them the same. But here I change the color of the house, change the color of the doors, and so on. That keeps it a little more fresh for me. But I do want each card to be special in their own, so that the recipient who gets it feels special. Now for snow, I thought it'd be fun to use this textured tonic paper. They have a lot of different pearl textured papers that would work for snow. This one happens to be an old one that I have. But I thought that would be nice for snow on these just to give that little added dimension. But you could definitely use white flocked paper or just white cardstock or white glitter paper for snow. Here I have the windows that I'm gluing on. These are stacked too high just because I'm that girl who likes to have dimension on my cards. You can see I'm also using very little liquid adhesive. With intricate, tiny little die cuts like this, you could put double-sided adhesive on the cardstock before you die cut, but I don't usually do that unless it's for sentiments, which again, I'll show you later on. Here, I felt like this was fine to do with liquid adhesive. I just glue all these layers together in front of the fire, and I enjoy it so much. Now you could do the scene as is and finish off the card. However, I like to dig through my older dies and find little ones that can be used to help build the scene. So I found these Poppy Stamps Evergreen Trio dies, which I've used in a video before. I will link to it on the top right here if you want to check it out. And I die cut those from green cardstock and layered them up a bit and glued them on the front of the card. I feel like this is a fun way to build that scene and use dies that I haven't used in a while. You could do little flowers down there. You could do a cute little dog. Many die sets that have bigger dies also have tiny ones included. Go dig through what you have. You might be surprised what you can find that you can use to create a die cut scene like any of the ones that I showed today. Okay, at this point I decided I wanted another layer behind the vellum. This is what I do. I get a little, I overthink things sometimes. So remember, just because you see somebody in a YouTube video adding those extra layers doesn't mean that you have to. This is my hobby, this is my passion, this is my job, and it makes me happy. So do whatever works for you. In this case, I thought a blue color cardstock behind the vellum would make those windows stand out a little bit more, and it really did make a big difference. So now I will glue that onto the white base. That white base die is included in the die set. For a sentiment, I use probably my most used sentiment die of all time. It's the Birch Press Thanks Sugar Script die. I really like the style of this. It goes with a lot of different cards. I cut it from black cardstock 3 times, glued it together, and added it to the windows. Now we have the easel portion of the card. I used the die in the set for that. Folded one way along the top of the house, and the other way for this little flap. I then used a strong liquid adhesive or a double-sided tape on that flap, and we lay our card front onto that. This creates that fun easel design, but remember, I could glue this card front onto a regular card if I prefer. Now in this case, I used the Simon Says Stamp You Got This die set to stamp You Make Life Beautiful on a craft cardstock strip, and I'm gluing that right inside the easel card. This can be used as a stopper to hold the front of the easel card up. As I mentioned, I don't really feel this is necessary, but I did want to show you that it is an option. You can even add a scene under there if you want, like green grass or a little sidewalk, but I like to keep it simple on the inside so I can have some space devoted to a personal sentiment. Here are the 3 that I've created so far, but I have more that I plan to make. The one on the right is the winter scene, how the die set was intended with the snow on the roof and the windows. The 2 on the left, I skipped the snow. That allows me to get a different look out of it. So here's the one with the snow. You can see I used that pearl texture cardstock for all the snow elements. We added the tree. I also added gold stars on the top of the tree and a little gold pearl for the doorknob on the door. Those little details really add a lot. I also added red pearls to the tree to make it look like Christmas lights. Now these are my 2 non-winter ones. So the die for the roof actually has a snow line on it. I just cut it straight and from dark cardstock to make a regular roof. I still used the evergreen trees, but I put little flowers at the base of it instead. Those little flowers are from an old Paper Smooches die set. They've recently retired, so their dies are no longer available, but you can find tiny little sequins or die cuts for those flowers, anything down there to add a little pop of color. Now these 2 are very similar, but I did do a different colored door on each just to change things up. And I did add a little shimmer pen to the thanks just to make it stand out even more. If you look closely at these dies, there are impressions and cut lines to add texture and detail. That is one of the reasons I really like Memory Box, Poppy Stamps, and Birch Press dies. They add those details when you do your die cutting. And by the way, those 3 companies are owned by the same man. And a little fun fact, he used to be an engineer also. Okay, now let's move on to my other favorite die set. This one and the bird set are definitely my favorite because they can be used in many different ways. This one creates a winter porch scene, but I did most of them as a non-winter card. So this is the Poppy Stamps Winter Porch Pop-Up Easel die set. I'll be honest, the die set was at my mom's house where I was die cutting some of these, and so that's why I'm just showing you the photo. But it cuts the house front, the door frame, the roof, the snow to go on it, and the windows. But I decided to make most of mine non-wintry by adding a little flower pot, which I'll show you later. So I assembled these off screen, but I put that same pearlized vellum behind the windows. And on the door, I cut the door and the frame from white cardstock, and then cut the door from a darker cardstock and sandwiched the pearlized vellum between for the window. That way you have a little door that opens up nicely. There are dies included in this stamp set for the snow on the top. I just skipped that for the non-winter scene cards. Here I wanted to show you an easy way to add a sentiment behind the door. So I have the white backing of the front of our card, and I'm just holding our die cut assembled piece at the center of that. Now I'll open up that door and place a sentiment inside. I'm using different sentiments from the Simon Says Stamp Greeting Mix 1 stamp set. Again, I need a bunch of thank you or hello cards, so I'm going for different greetings that work for that. I place the sentiment inside of the door, then I carefully remove the front scene, but leave that white backing in there. And now we can stamp that with black ink. As I mentioned before, I do all of my die cutting first, so I have a bunch of these white backing pieces already done, so I can stamp them all at once. So I have my house fronts all assembled. Now we have this white backing stamped, and we can assemble those next. So again, you can see me use that liquid adhesive, really quick to add, and it'll hold strong. We don't have to worry about it coming apart. Now I can lay that onto the backing, and our sentiment will show through when the door is opened. Now you could do a bigger scene on the inside if you wanted to. I think I may go and add a white heart above the sentiment, but it's up to you. There are many ways you can use these. Now it's time to add the sentiment to the window on the door of our card, and I did this for all of them. I wanted a hello word, and I dug through my stash to find a hello that was small enough. And I'm using the Mama Elephant Hello Friend die, but only cutting out the word hello. For this, I'm using a double-sided adhesive sheet because it's a time saver with something this intricate, but you could use liquid adhesive. Let me give you some tips on using a double-sided adhesive sheet though. After trying many brands, I have found that Altenew has the best double-sided adhesive. It's thick, but it die cuts nicely. The release paper has a pattern on it, so it's easy to see. You peel off one side of the release paper, add it to your cardstock. This is a heavyweight white cardstock, and then it's ready to die cut. So I want to really be careful to use as much of this cardstock with adhesive as possible. It's not as economical as using a liquid adhesive, so you want to be smart about it. So what I'm doing here is figuring out how to maximize how many hellos I can cut out from this piece. So I'll go ahead and make some little marks, and then I'll cut that piece of cardstock into as many pieces as I can to cut as many hellos as I can. So for me, I like using double-sided adhesive. I'd use it on everything if I could, but that is not economical. So I save it for the things where it's really helpful, like this intricate hello. I tested this double-sided adhesive with different die cut machines. I'm using a Gemini Junior today, and also with different cardstocks and dies, and I've never had a problem with it. Here I die cut the word hello and trimmed off the word friend completely. And then once you have it in place, you just press it down with a bone folder or your finger to make sure it's secure. Okay, so once I have all my card fronts done, I'll show you a closer look at them later, we can assemble the easel part. Once again, you fold one way at the top, another way at the little flap, put adhesive on the flap, and line your card front onto that. So I did a bunch of different types, but on all of them, I put a little heart at the top. Remember I showed you that heart die earlier from Simon Says Stamp? And I either cut it from glitter or added shimmer with a shimmer pen. So here's a look at one that I did. I will say on the hello, I did die cut it from white cardstock and from colored cardstock and layered those together so it would stand out more. But that double-sided adhesive made it easier to do. And I didn't even use a whole half a sheet for all of these cards. There you can see how the card will stand up nicely because of that easel feature. Let me show you some of the details that I added to my non-holiday versions of this porch scene. I added a little silver gem for the handle on the door. I also have the sentiment inside, and remember there's vellum behind the windows and the door window. Now for those flower pots, I dug through my stash, found what I had. This Memory Box Cherry Blossom die set is a favorite of mine. I cut it from different colors of peach cardstock and cut the flowers off and glued them onto the card. Now the leaves in the flower pot, that's from the die set that I'm going to show you on the next card. I just cut it off the corners. For the pot, I used the Altenew Parlor Palm die set, which I've used in videos before, and die cut it from gray cardstock. For the grass below that, I used the Lawn Fawn Mushroom House die set. Again, I just dug through my stash, looked for different little grass die cuts that would work, and added that to my card. There are many different things you could put on the front of these cards on the scenes. You could put little animals, maybe a cat or a dog. You could put things inside of the windows. You could even put a bird on the little porch top. To keep things fresh, I changed up the color of the house, but I kept all the flowers the same because the die that I used cut so many flowers at once, there wasn't a need to change that up. I do like, again, that the Poppy Stamps dies add detail to the die by doing those score lines along the house for lines. By the way, these two Lila made on her own. You can see she added more flowers than me, and I really like that it's done that way. So remember, look through your dies and your stamps and think about what you can add to the scene that you already have. Okay, here are some winter scenes using the snow die that comes with it. You can see the snow on the top of the roof there. I did use that Stitching Pink Fresh die in the background to add some detail. and the evergreen trio dies for the trees on the side, along with some red pearls, and I did the hello and gold glitter. I think this is my favorite of the winter scenes, and this would be great for thank you cards for holiday gifts. Here's another that's similar but different colors, and I used a different background die on the house to give it a little bit of detail. This is a great opportunity to use some of your dies again to get more use out of them. On this one, I decided to add a little snowman. I've used this Trinity Stamp snowman before in videos. He's really cute and easy to assemble, and I added him to a couple of my cards. And here's one version where I skipped the pop-up feature and just added everything to a card front. It's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And by the way, the different easel cards I show you today all fit into the regular envelope. On this one, I used some balloon dies to create a happy scene on the front of this card. I can add a birthday sentiment to this one. It'd also be fun to do like a banner going across the roof of that front porch. You could put different letters on each. That was Lila's idea, and I did find some banner dies and letter dies that would work for that, but we haven't gotten a chance to make that yet. But you can think of all the different little dies that you may already have that you can add to these scenes to get more use out of them. So think about it. Next time you invest in a large die set, think of what you already have that might be able to be used with it to get more use out of it. Another tip, when you're making a bunch of cards like this, save some without sentiments that aren't complete. So next time you need a card for a particular occasion, you can start with that. Okay, the last easel cards that I created before I show you my favorite new toy for my craft room are these floral ones that you can just change up with whatever color cardstocks you have on hand. This is the Poppy Stamps Adriana pop-up easel die set. It was on my favorites list, and I've used it many times for easel cards and non-easel cards. The frame die on the left fits great on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card, or you can use it with the easel dies. There are also the smaller 3 label floral dies that you can use on a card. I didn't use them today, but it's nice that they're included to give you more bang for your buck. So these are very fast to assemble. I just die cut from green cardstocks and added it to the white backing. Then I went back to that same cherry blossom die set that I used earlier and cut off little flowers to add to the scene. You could leave it as is, add little pearls or sequins, or add little die cuts as I'm doing. These little flower die cuts are a great way to use up colorful scraps you may have. You could even use glitter cardstock if you wanted. So I die cut and assembled many card fronts as you see here. Next, I wanted to show you how to die cut the easel card portion of this when you have a smaller die machine like I do. So this die is really long. It won't fit in a typical die cut machine. Let me show you the trick. I have my regular Gemini Junior here, and I place it in my die cut machine as you see, with part of the die and cardstock hanging off one end. You run it through the die cut machine, move it a little bit, and then run it through again. So it just takes 2 passes through to cut that extra long die cut, and it cuts beautifully this way. You can do this with whatever die cut machine you may have. So don't be scared of long dies, especially those slimline dies. If your die cut machine is wide enough, which most are for most dies, you can do the die cutting with 2 passes through your die cut machine. So I did the 2 folds on the easel card die cut piece, adding strong adhesive to the little flap as we've done many times in this video, and then we can add our card front. By the way, for the sentiment on this card, I die cut a white oval, just a basic oval there to add to the center. This particular die set is great for using up whatever scraps you have because you can use whatever colors of cardstocks for these die cuts, then add whatever flowers you want to it. Now on some of these, I did add a little cardstock strip there to be a little stopper for the easel. Again, I don't normally do that, but I wanted to show you how it could be done. And that particular sentiment, by the way, is from the Mama Elephant Friendship Sentiment stamp set. These kind of sentiment sets are hard to come by, where there are sentiments that are good for the inside of cards, but also for sentiment strips. Also, the You Are Simply the Best Ever is from the Simon Says Stamp Everything Together stamp set, and that fit nicely in the center of the oval on the front of the card. Let's look at the different designs I've made so far here. Now, this is a great design for monochromatic look or whatever cardstocks you have extra of or left over from other projects. So use up those scraps, use up those specialty cardstocks. When you combine them with detailed dies like this, it doesn't take much effort to create a special card. Another thing you can do with dies like this is offset your die cuts for a layered look. In this case, I die cut from 2 different colors of green, flipped one over, and glued them together to create a layered look. You could change up the sentiment in the center, but I need a lot of thank you cards, as I mentioned, so I kept them all the same. Okay, before we go, I wanted to show you the thing that I bought that kind of has changed my life recently. So I got a gift card from Lila's teacher for all the help I've given her this year, and I decided to buy a giant case that will make it easy for me to carry my craft supplies around with me, from in my craft room to my kitchen table, to my mom's house, to the front of the fireplace, whatever, and keep all those little die cuts separate. This is a giant makeup case. Now, if you know me, I have 5 things of makeup. I know nothing about makeup, but I found this and I am blown away. It is not the prettiest thing, but check this out. Look at all the compartments. You can change the size of them, and I can keep all the different dies and die cuts that I'm using at the time all organized. Oh my goodness, my heart is just pounding. So I can carry this around with me. I can do it on the kitchen table and easily close it up when I'm done, because I usually fill the kitchen table with all of my stuff. Now it can all be tidy. So if you are like me, and if you are crazy about die cut assembly and taking it around with you, I encourage you to check out this case. There are many like it. Some are smaller. I'll link to the one that I found that worked great for me. And my heart is so happy. This is my joy, assembling a bunch of cards at once out of die cuts, and that will make it easier for me. So I thought I'd share that with you. I hope I shared a lot of different tips with you today on how to change up your dies to get new looks, tips for assembling and mass producing. This is a fun part of my hobby for me, but I'm glad to share them with you here today too. If you are interested in anything I talked about today, they're linked below in my YouTube description. You can also check out a couple related videos here in the middle. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope you find time to do whatever crafting brings you happiness. Have a great day. We'll see you soon, and Merry Christmas.